Hello and welcome to the School of Kingdom Writers podcast. My name is Brad Paquette and I will be your host today. I'm super excited. We have three of our students in the Arche Year cohort joining me today. So Arche Year is our year-long part-time online program that covers the novel writing process as well as the author platform building process. So we're helping writers learn how to write a novel and how to actually get it out into distribution and attract the attention of publishers, agents, and readers. As part of that program, we have our cohort, which is kind of an intensive unit that these students pay tuition to be a part of it, and they receive extra coaching and mentorship and one-on-one support through the process. So we have 6 students enrolled in that. 3 of them are men, coincidentally, and 3 of them are women. So today I'm being joined by the 3 men of the Arche Year cohort, and next week we'll have the 3 female students join us. So keep your eye out for that as well. If you're new with us, if this is the first time you're hanging out with us for our podcast, you might be joining us on Facebook Live or catching this, on Spotify or Google Podcast or wherever you listen to things like that. But if you're new, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go to sokw.org/info, INFO, right now. And there's a form there where you can fill out your information to get a packet of information about the School of Kingdom Writers. So I would love to send you one of these packets. It's got just some basic stuff about who we are and what we do. And the reason that I want to send that to you is because we are in the launch phase of this ministry. And part of our job right now is to inform the public about who we are. And chances are that either you or someone you know is an aspiring writer or believes that the media can and should be different in America. And so if either one of those things are true, either for you or somebody that you know, then it could be a good connection. So we'd love to send you some things. There's no charge, no obligation, nothing like that. So when you fill that out, you get a few things. You'll get this cool letter that has my signature on it, which you can save for forgery purposes down the road. And it's going to include this little booklet about our vision that we worked hard to produce. It's going to tell you who we are and what we're about. So as well as a couple other things in there as well. So that's sokw.org/INFO. So today I am joined by 3 gentlemen, none other than Eddy Skripko, Joshua Bowers Eno, and Jeffrey Lucas Jr. And these are their official stage names as authors moving forward. So thanks for joining me, guys. I'm so glad that you're here. Cool. So go ahead and unmute yourselves and we'll get rolling here. So, I want you guys to start by telling me a story. I want you to tell me a real brief story about how you got to the School of Kingdom Writers, right? We're kind of a fledgling organization, so I'm always curious about that. But Jeff, why don't you start? How'd you get here?
Yeah, it's a crazy story actually for me. I had actually linked up with the Grove City Vineyard. I pastor a vineyard church, a small vineyard church here in Plain City, and had linked up with the Grove City Christian Fellowship and had learned about the school. And basically the pastor there said, "Hey, there's this school going on. Here's this card." And I said, "Great. Well, if I know any writers, I'll throw this to them." I kind of logged it away and didn't really ever think about it again. And then I kind of went through a period of time in my life where God was just doing some upheaval in my life, and there was birthed this just need for creative outlet. And so I kind of went back to that, and I started following School of Kingdom Writers, just kind of paying attention to what you guys were doing. And then I did some little writing on the side, and you had a call for applications to the cohort. And I said, I've never really had any feedback on my writing, so let's just see if they tell me it sucks. And so I sent some stuff in, and you said it didn't suck, and so here I am.
Awesome. Yeah. And I remember when we first talked, you weren't even really sure if you wanted to do it, right? You mostly just wanted to make me read your stuff and tell you
I
if it
said, here's a
sucked or
free
not.
way to get some feedback and make Brad do some extra work. And so I really wrestled with whether or not it was something that was even for me. We were just like launching this ministry. We really just put our life into upheaval in the last 2 years. And so I couldn't figure out how this fit in, but it's really been an anchor for me to like have this project, have this progress that I can make. And it's actually dovetailed so many other things we're doing. It's been only God. Only God could be dovetailing things like that. It's been awesome.
That's really, really cool. Cool. And Eddy, how about you? How'd you get here?
So I've always had a love for reading. I love stories. It's just been a big passion of mine. I've always wanted to write something of my own, but I just never had the guidance or anything necessary to pull that off. So one day I'm sitting out in my front yard under my lovely pergola, and I'm just scrolling through Facebook, and I see this ad for the School of Kingdom Writers, and I'm like, oh, it's a free novel writing course. It's like, oh, you've got a lot of time on your hands. Why not? And then Brad sent me the email, and he encouraged me to be a part of the cohort and just get like a deep, intensive time of getting everything that's really necessary to be successful as a novelist. And I'm just like, I was a little doubtful at first because it was just a big responsibility to take on, but I was just had this strong sense, like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna have let an opportunity pass, and I didn't want to do that. So I committed, and it has been incredible. I don't think I would have made the progress I've made if I hadn't joined the cohort and been a part of the School of Kingdom Writers. So it's phenomenal, and I encourage anyone to do it.
That's awesome, Eddie. And you've been a breath of fresh air for us too, like literally, because half of our students are in Ohio where the weather's all gloomy and terrible. And Eddie joins us from Hawaii each week and, is like sitting outside in the sunshine when we're doing class. So we're really, I'm glad that you're here, Eddie. And Josh, how about you? How'd you get here?
So I've known Brad for a few years now, and that was just this one Sunday. I happened to be in line behind him we were doing communion that way in line going up to the front, and I just felt compelled to pray for him. We held up the line. I was just praying for him. And some of those things that came out of that, he said, do you know what we're thinking about? And I said, no. So he sat me down. He said, let me tell you about this. And so then, that kind of progressed, and then he invited me to participate a little bit more, in the board of directors. But it was just such a neat thing for me to see, the school kind of coming together and getting to participate in that in some different ways over the last couple of years.
That's cool. And Josh, I know you don't remember exactly what you were praying.
I don't.
But you were saying things that were like exactly spot on with, what the kind of discovery process that the Lord was leading us through as we were, considering this calling that we felt we had from the Lord to start this school. So you sort of came on a little bit timidly. Not timidly is not the right word. We're all writers. I'm sure we could workshop that word a little bit. But you came on hesitantly. That's good. Yeah. Just gonna check out the Arche Year program, right? And to really be helpful and to provide feedback and things like that. But it seems like you've really like settled in and committed yourself to it.
Yeah, that's been a process. And it's been a good process to go through, to kind of see that, sometimes we can take hold of things that we didn't think we were going to, or that we could. And that's been fun to watch.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, there are about 200 students that have gone through the free version of the Arche Year class this year, and 6 that have stuck with the cohort. We started with 8. We lost a couple really early on, and but 6 have stuck with it. And so, one of our core values at the School of Kingdom Writers is transparency. So you guys can say whatever you need to say, and that's all right. A couple months ago, or rather at the end of this summer, we had an intern, and I did her exit interview on Facebook Live, right? Because I figured, I'm sure there are things we need to improve, and that's okay if we talk about that. But I want to know, how has your experience compared to your expectations, good and bad, or just different? Eddie, you alluded to this a little bit, kind of you've been happy with the program overall, but specifically, like, what were you expecting coming in, and how has it looked, in line with that or differently?
Yeah, I mean, really, my expectation was just to come in and learn how to write a book. I really did not expect it to be turned into what it was, because you don't just touch on the writing part. You touch on what it takes to be successful in this industry. You talk about marketing, you talk about social media, you talk about all these things that are necessary. And the writing process, you really gave us really great exercises that I didn't expect, like how to write good dialogue and all that. I mean, it's like, and just how to follow a structure. And Brad always uses this term, don't be a pantser, don't fly by the seat of your pants, be a plotter. And knowing, like,
I hate that term.
But no, I mean, it was, at first I'm like, a lot of people who are writers, we just think, we just write as we feel. But it's like, no, a structure is a good thing to follow. So it's just the logistical aspects. I think I'm using the right word there. That is not what I expected coming in at all, but it has been very cool.
Awesome. Josh, how about you?
So I'm actually kind of a little bit the opposite. I knew that the curriculum was going to involve a lot of these sort of technical tools and some of this stuff, which I wanted to learn more about anyway, and that was sort of interesting to me. I didn't necessarily come in as much focused on the novel process, and that's really been a surprising element for me. I mean, if you've never done it, it's a trip. And it's still a trip, it's ongoing, but that whole creative process and seeing how that gets shaped over time and where these ideas sort of come from seemingly out of the blue sometimes has been really fascinating for me. And that's been a very rich experience.
That's awesome. And all of you guys, everybody on the call today has written over 40,000 words, I think, right? And Jeff, I mean, which in 4 months, right? Which is incredible. I mean, for a lot of writers that are listening to this, they would love to see that kind of progress. So you've all really committed yourselves well to the process and just kept going. And Jeff, you've finished the first draft of your novel, which is awesome. And how has your experience compared to what you expected coming into this?
Well, I I don't think I've ever told you this, but there's this sneaking, like,
Great. I can't
there's
wait.
there's this sneaking suspicion in me, like when I first got started, that I'm like, what if this is just one of those, like, those schools where they like take your money and like pat you on the head and say like you're doing a good job, and then you never really learn anything, and then that's the end of it. And I mean, luckily I was connected with some people who actually knew you personally, so that took some of that risk off the table. But for me, I was really I was curious how much value I was actually going to get out of it. And so for me, the which I always talk about, the discipleship piece that's in it, that it's not just we're talking about, this is how you write a novel, or this is how you create a brand or whatever, but also just like, this is how you carry yourself in a way that's integrous. This is how you carry yourself as a Christ follower in a very dark industry. And there's so much discipline and and submission to a process and to others that goes into that, and obviously to Jesus. So that has been for me the most life-giving part of the whole thing, and the most unexpected.
That's really cool. Yeah, and you guys are making a great commercial for the program right now. I didn't, for the record, I didn't tell you guys
I had
to
my
say this
lines
stuff,
right
right?
here. I'm expecting my I got my Venmo. I just emailed you my Venmo account. So
That's fair. That's fair. Well, and I've been, one of the things that I've been doing a lot recently is connecting with other writers groups that are out there. Just to, there are 12 students out there in the world that are supposed to be in Zanesville next year for our full-time program. And so, just connecting with writers groups to try to get our information in front of the people that the Holy Spirit has already positioned for this. But one of the things that I've noticed is that, we do a lot of things differently. We have a different emphasis, but something that I hardly ever find is a consistent, like, spiritual component of the program. Right, that there are a lot of programs out there that'll kind of teach you how to write or give you some tools or mechanics to use in writing, but almost none that really take like a whole person approach like we do here. And so it's really encouraging for me to hear you say that, Jeff. But for all of you guys, how has your sense of calling changed? We all have this is a like common phrase that we hear in our culture is like, I feel called to do this, or I feel called to do that. A lot of people in America would say right now, I feel called to write. Now that you're, a little over halfway through this experience, how has your idea of what that means shifted? Josh, you want to take us away on that one?
Sure. So my perspective on this at this point is that, there are times I believe that we get a really strong sense from the Lord, like, hey, I need to do this. And I'm called into this. And I think on the opposite end, sometimes you get a real strong sense that, hey, don't do this or stop doing this. And I've seen both of those things operating in my life at various times. But I also think there are these times we have when we're presented with some kind of opportunity or something just kind of shows up out of the blue, it sort of feels like. And, sometimes we talk about whether, all things being equal, yada, yada, yada. And sometimes I think things really kind of are sort of equal. And you sort of get this choice, like, well, are you going to do this or not? Are you going to take this opportunity or not? Are you going to go through that door or not? And it's okay if you do, and it's okay if you don't. But sometimes you can take those opportunities, and in those moments, almost sort of hear God saying, like, well, why not? Like, and I real quick story. I heard years ago, this guy was working on a project or something, and he had this opportunity to learn how to drive a forklift. He's like, I'm never going to need to do this, and so he didn't. And then years later, he was working on something, and I don't know if they were like on the weekend or something, and at this location, well, they needed to operate this forklift, and they nobody was there who could do it, and so they literally had to sit there for a few hours waiting for a forklift operator to get there. And the guy all the time is like, if I had just learned how to drive the forklift, I could have done this. And so I think we do have those opportunities sometimes. And so I think the question of calling and the question of opportunity, turns a little bit from maybe what we're expecting.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Eddy, what has your experience been in that regard?
Ooh, that is a tough question. I mean, I think when it comes to having a sense of calling, I always knew I had a call to write, but it was just, what does that even look like? I just, I went into this like, 80% sure it was the right move. And, that's the thing, is you just kind of have to take a chance and see how it goes. And, it's just incredible seeing, all the support I've found, even people around me who were like waiting for me to make up my mind about what I was going to do with my life. They were just like, okay, this is right. This is what he should be doing. And I just, I really just enjoy seeing all the confirmations. It's like, and the more I go through this, and there are times it becomes tough. I mean, people don't realize this writing is hard. It really is a tough thing. It's not just some easy thing. It's like, it takes a lot of, it can be an emotional toll, but it's just such an incredible thing that God does through this whole matter. And, every time I'm tempted to give up, I just get this strong sense of God just telling me, it's like, nope, I've called you to this. You've committed to, keep this up on a regular basis, and I want you to live up to that commitment. And it's just, following through with what I've at least committed to and taking this opportunity. It's just, I have seen so much blessing come on it, and it's grown me in intense ways. So honestly, just taking that opportunity and taking that chance, God blessed it. So that's just verified my calling. So
Yeah, that's really cool. And how about you, Jeff? What was your experience coming into this, and then compared to where you are now as far as terminology, like being called to write and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I came into it not even really, I wouldn't have used that language. Like, I feel called to write. I used language like, I feel like this is an invitation that Jesus has for me. I don't know necessarily what he has in it, but I'm going to go ahead and choose to accept it. And so as things have kind of, I wouldn't have probably even considered myself a writer necessarily coming into it. I would consider myself a lot of things, probably things that I shouldn't consider myself, but I would consider myself a lot of things, but probably not a writer. And then over time, just taking these like small, tiny little steps of obedience, these like doing the work that's in front of me and saying, this is the work that God laid in front of me. I'm going to be faithful to that work. And so over time, that's grown. And so I think there's this temptation to like, God has called me to write equals God has called me to write a bestseller, but like, I think that's not necessarily the call. I think the call is to obedience. And so, and then I can see as I walk in that, like, oh, God actually put something in me for that, for this moment that I never would have seen had I not walked to this moment. So it's been awesome for me to experience that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I hear you guys really saying a lot of the same things, all three of you, that you felt like this was an opportunity, not necessarily like you had to do it or something like that, but you had an opportunity, but God has kind of blessed and confirmed as you've moved through this. And, whenever I talk to anybody and they have a really specific outcome tied to like a calling type of statement, I'm always really cautious about that, right? God called me to write a bestseller. I'm always like, whoa. Perhaps we can start with God is calling you to be obedient to write. Like let's start there, because I've worked with so many people that walk forward in just one step at a time obedience have so much better outcomes than people that are believe they're moving towards a particular outcome the whole time. It seems to be far more consistent with how I see God operate in the world. What do you think, Jeff?
I had a mentor who used to say anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And I really latched onto that. I mean, he's obviously not advocating for like not doing things excellently, right? But he's saying like anything worth doing or anything that you're called into is worth failing at. It's worth not getting the results that you wanted to. If this is worth doing at all, it's worth doing it without the results. Or like you said, it's probably not actually obedience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so Jeff, this is a tough question to answer, I know, but why is your voice important for the world to hear? You've had some opportunity to kind of play in this world now and improvise and figure it out. So at this point, why is it important for you to put this message out that God has given you?
I think my story in my novel work and then in my blogging and writing and other stuff is really one of it's reformation. It's coming home. I think that so often Jesus, railed against people who said that they can see, but they really couldn't, and people who worshipped an institution over worshiping God. And so I don't know, as a pastor, I'm, a little bit concerned that maybe we've gotten that way in the American church, that maybe that's where we've ended up, or at least that's maybe where we're heading. And so I think that when we're looking about the way we carry our finances and the way we champion our culture, right? What do we value? What do we celebrate? And who are our heroes? And when I look around, the American church, and I look around American, culture, I just don't know that we're picking the right people. And I don't know that we're celebrating the right things. And so most of my writing is just about like looking at I call it complicating the gospel. Like I know that the gospel is really simple, but sometimes throwing some mud on stuff and saying not everything is as neat and clean and fits into these nice boxes. And my story, my life story, is really one of redemption from a world where I had my nice boxes and I had everything figured out, and I hurt a lot of people putting them in those boxes. And so part of it is repentance, honestly, for me. And just celebrating the reformation that God's done in my own life too.
Yeah, that's real. Thanks, Jeff. Josh, how about you? Why is your voice important to be heard?
So I think, even just to play off some of those kind of cultural awarenesses, I see a lot of energy kind of driving forward. There's just a lot of emphasis on progress and on, like when I was a teenager, for instance, I was really big into tech news. There's just always new inventions, new stuff coming out. And, as I've gone along, I think I come to value, the pause. There's value in wandering a little bit, in looking backward, to a degree, instead of just always looking forward. And so that's something that I want to bring, is that ability to kind of, whether it's looking at old poetry or whether it's, just kind of taking a second to focus in on something that is not obvious or not flashy, in order to kind of put ourselves in a better frame of mind.
Cool. Yeah. Eddy, how about you? Why is your voice important right now in America?
Well, you mentioned I grew up in Hawaii. That sounds like living in paradise, and it can be, but it was a bit of a challenge for me. I was not the stereotypical person who grows up in Hawaii. I was this like introverted kid reading books on the side and just kind of to himself. What I'm getting at is I was always one of those like social misfits who no one really expects much of, average student, socially awkward. But I think my voice is worth hearing because through finding some friends who were Christians and through finding Jesus, I just really stopped feeling like an outcast. And I've got this heart that for people out there who are going through that same struggle. So I think God's calling on me really is to write about things that gives the same hope to some of those folks out there, whether they be young or old, that they always feel like they're social misfits for whatever reason. They feel like they're cast aside. I've been through that feeling and I have come out the other side by the grace of God. And so I think that is what why my voice needs to be heard, because God has pulled me through this and he wants me to use that to his glory.
Yeah, I love that, Eddy. And so, well, tell us about the book that you're working on.
So the book I'm working on, so it's loosely based on a friend of mine's life. It is fictional. It's my story, but it's based on somebody I know's life. It's the the premise is I've got a character who is a woman who has come from a broken, abusive childhood. Alcohol is rampant. She herself is an alcoholic. And she ends up losing everything and finds herself in the arms of a man who she doesn't really love, but she feels like she has nowhere else to go. And ends up in this disastrous marriage with a child. It's a very, very tragically abusive time. And in the midst of it all, she ends up finding God. She ends up finding the father that she did not have as a child. And the redemption that happens in her life is amazing. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying. It's like, if you hear a story like this and realize that people go through this and come out with joy and still believing that God is real, I mean, it will get people to sit. I think it'll get Christians to sit back. It's like, would I still have such strong faith if I went through this kind of torment? So I really think that this is a story that could deeply impact people's faith and give people who are in similar situations hope. So
Perfect. And Eddy, if people want to learn more about you or follow you or, be alerted when this book, comes out in probably some time, but how can they begin to follow you now? I know you guys are all in kind of your formation stages with your brands and marketing and stuff, but where could they go today? You
can find me on eddyskripko.com, the Facebook page, Eddy Skripko, and my Twitter is @Eddy Skripko, Eddy with a Y, by the way, EDDY. Yeah.
Cool. And then, and Skripko is not a common name either. And that's SKRIPKO, right?
Correct. Thank you, Brad.
Right. Awesome. Absolutely. And Josh, how about you? Tell us about your book.
So I've got a kind of a near future setting, but I'm trying to work to make that not like a super dystopia, because I think that, to represent the world, as not so great in some ways, and some, and theoretically okay in other ways, is kind of a parallel for our experience. So within that environment, I've got a character who is kind of coming to a point where he has to grapple with the fact that his sense of worth, for himself and in the society and in the circle of people he's connected to, really is very much tied to his success and his wealth and the things that he is able to achieve, and so he comes to this point of being able to see kind of a different way to approach that, and so it's been a good journey to explore that.
Cool. And so how can people follow you if they'd like to keep up with this project?
So you can go to joshuabowerseno.com, and you are welcome to sign up for my newsletter.
Awesome. Fantastic. And Jeff, tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I'm writing a young adult action book that's really just based on the life of the growing up years of the Apostle Peter, or Simon at the time, and just looking at it, it kind of juxtaposes a little bit just kind of the cultural moment we find ourselves in, and kind of takes it back 2,000 years to first century Israel. And I just love the verse that says, we don't have a high priest who can't sympathize with our weaknesses. And so I think that when we read the gospel, if we read this, if we can kind of immerse ourselves in the setting and the context a little bit, and kind of see the moment that Jesus was arriving into, I just think it could really benefit the way that we're looking at our current cultural moment. So it's it like I said, it kind of complicates the gospel. So but I'm really looking forward to what it can do for folks who really want to kind of walk that dust that Jesus might have walked.
That's awesome. And how can people follow the project?
So at Jeffrey Lucas Jr. 2 on Twitter, because apparently there's already a Jeffrey Lucas Jr. Go figure.
You're gonna have to fight him and get that back. Yeah.
Take him down. Yep. And
all
then
right.
At Jeffrey Lucas 2 on Facebook, and then for the moment jefflucaswrites.com, and we'd love to connect with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. And so those are all great answers. And I'm so thankful for you guys doing this today. And I'm also thankful for you being a part of the cohort. I really feel like I've gotten to know each of you, and it's been a really wonderful experience for me. I really loved kind of hearing your hearts and seeing that come through your work, and just having the opportunity to work with you guys. So thank you so much.
Yep.
before we go today, I want to pray for you guys. So if
great.
you're listening to the podcast, if you're joining us live, please pray. But if you're listening to the podcast later on, your prayers are still valid. If you listen to this in 30 years after the robot overlords have all forced us into underground prisons and they're piping this in as some kind of psychological torture, you can still pray then too. So wherever you are, please pray with me now.
Is that the novel you're working on?
It is now. So
Whoa.
all right, so let's pray. So God, I'm really thankful for these three guys. I'm thankful for the unique perspectives you've given each of them, and Lord, just the way that you've just given this program the capacity to gather people from different places, different backgrounds, different perspectives, and to all kind of point it in the same direction, God. And I just love the way that in this group, especially, there's this wonderful sense of freedom to have differences of opinion and different, that small things can be different, but you've just glued them together as a group, and that cohort holds value in this. So Lord, I ask you bless each of their work. I bless their audiences that they're building. I bless the folks that are listening today that are going to connect with them and say, I heard the first podcast way back when. And so I'm so thankful for these guys, so thankful for what you're doing. And I just bless their work in your name now, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
And thank you.
Awesome, guys. So thank you again for joining me. If you're listening to this live or on the podcast, you can subscribe to us via any standard podcast app that you use. You can find all the great links at sokw.org/listen. And then you'll find links to all the regular podcast players and things like that. But more importantly, I need you to do something right now. I need you to go to sokw.org/subscribe and join our prayer list. Really, the foundation of everything that you've heard today is prayer. We spent so much time in prayer before a single student joined us in any classes, and that's what continues to drive us forward. That's what's going to continue to drive forward the careers of these students is the prayer foundation that they're establishing right now. So sokw.org/subscribe is the best way to stay in the loop with the things that we're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for praying along with us. And thanks for taking 2 minutes right now to check out these guys' platforms and to, give them a follow on Facebook or join their newsletters on their websites and things like that. So be blessed. And I will see you next week as the women of cohort join us for a similar conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right, thank